I never thought I'd be the kind of woman standing in her father's doorway, drenched from the rain, explaining why I arrived in a taxi instead of the luxury car he gave me 6 months ago. But there I was, water dripping from my coat onto the marble floor of his grand entrance hall, watching my father's face change from warm greeting to confused concern. "Clara, sweetheart," he said, stepping forward to embrace me despite my wet clothes. "Why did you come by taxi? What happened to the Tesla I gave you?" My mouth opened, but no words came out. How could I explain? Where would I even start? The past few months had been a blur of excuses and ignored red flags, and now here we were, at the moment of truth I'd been dreading. Before I could gather my thoughts, Brandon stepped forward from behind me. My husband of 3 years, the man I'd trusted with everything, moved with a confidence that made my stomach turn. He placed his hand on my shoulder in what probably looked like a supportive gesture to my father, but I could feel the warning in his grip. "I gave it to my mother," Brandon announced, his voice steady and almost proud. "She needed it more." The silence that followed felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I watched my father's expression shift through several emotions in the span of a heartbeat: confusion, disbelief, and then something I'd never seen on his face before. His jaw tightened. His eyes, usually so warm when they looked at me, turned cold and sharp as ice. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he walked past both of us without a word, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor as he headed toward his study. I heard the door close with a gentle click that somehow felt more ominous than if he'd slammed it. Through the closed door, I heard him pick up the phone. His voice was muffled, but I caught enough words to make my blood run cold. "Yes, I need to report. Stolen vehicle. My daughter's name." Brandon's hand fell from my shoulder. "What's he doing?" he whispered, but I couldn't answer. I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at that closed door, wondering how my life had fallen apart so completely. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how we ended up in that hallway, soaking wet and facing my father's quiet rage, I need to take you back 6 months, back to my birthday, when everything still seemed perfect. It was a beautiful spring morning when my father surprised me with the Tesla. I'd been teaching second grade for 5 years, driving the same old Honda Civic I'd bought used when I graduated college. I never complained about it, never asked for anything extravagant. That wasn't who I was raised to be. But my father, he always saw things I didn't say out loud. He knew I'd been having trouble with my car. The check engine light that kept coming on, the strange noises it made on cold mornings. So when he told me to come outside during my birthday brunch, I expected maybe a cake or a small gathering of relatives. Instead, sitting in his circular driveway wrapped with an enormous red bow was a pristine white Tesla Model S. I actually cried. Real tears of shock and gratitude. "Daddy, this is too much," I kept saying, but he just hugged me tight and said, "Nothing is too much for my little girl. You work hard. You deserve nice things." Brandon was there too, of course. He seemed thrilled, taking pictures of me with the car, posting them on social media with captions about how lucky I was to have such a generous father. He drove it home for us that day since I was too nervous to handle such an expensive vehicle. I remember watching him behind the wheel, thinking how handsome he looked, how lucky I was to have a supportive husband and a loving father. Looking back now, I should have noticed things that day. Small things. Like how Brandon kept running his hands over the steering wheel, checking all the features, asking my father detailed questions about the warranty and insurance. Or how, when my father's sister, Aunt Patricia, arrived late to the party, she pulled me aside and asked, "Where's Brandon's mother? Wasn't she invited?" I'd made excuses. She said she was busy with something. You know how she is. Patricia's expression had been skeptical, but she didn't push. She just kissed my cheek and said, "Well, happy birthday, sweetheart. Beautiful car. Make sure you keep it in your name." At the time, I'd laughed at her lawyer paranoia. Now I understood she'd been trying to warn me. The first 2 weeks with the Tesla were wonderful. I loved the smooth, quiet drive to school. My colleagues admired it in the parking lot. I felt proud every time I slid into the driver's seat. Brandon seemed happy for me, always offering to charge it overnight, to clean it on weekends. Then one afternoon I came home from work to find an unfamiliar car in our driveway, an old beat-up Honda Civic that looked like it had seen better days 20 years ago. "Whose car is this?" I asked Brandon, who was in the garage. He barely looked up from his phone. "Oh, that's temporary. My mum's car broke down again, so I'm letting her borrow this one from a guy at work until she figures things out." Something about his tone bothered me, but I couldn't pinpoint what. Is she okay? Does she need help paying for repairs? Brandon's eyes flashed with something, annoyance, defensiveness, before he softened his expression. "She's fine. You know how proud she is. She wouldn't accept money from us anyway." That night his mother called. Mrs. Louise had a voice that carried, and our apartment walls were thin. I was in the bedroom folding laundry when I heard her through Brandon's phone, loud enough that he might as well have had her on speaker. "Finally, you do something useful for me. That girl's father gives her everything while I struggle with nothing. It's about time you remembered who raised you." I froze, a shirt half folded in my hands. The words stung more than they should have. I'd always tried to be kind to Mrs. Louise, even when she made little comments about my privileged upbringing, or how some people have it easy. Brandon's response was too quiet for me to hear, but his mother's voice came through again. "I don't care what she thinks. I'm your mother. I come first." I pretended to be asleep when Brandon came to bed that night. I didn't want to fight. I told myself I was being oversensitive, that of course his mother was important to him, that helping her with a temporary car situation was a kind thing to do. But over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. The Tesla wasn't always in our garage when I got home from work. Brandon always had explanations. He'd taken it to get detailed, or he was test driving it to make sure everything ran smoothly, or he'd loaned it to a colleague whose car was in the shop. Each excuse seemed reasonable on its own. But together, they started forming a pattern that made me uneasy. One Friday, I finished my lesson plans early and decided to leave school right after the final bell instead of staying late like I usually did. I texted Brandon that I'd be home early, suggesting we could grab dinner together. He responded immediately. "Stuck in a meeting, might be late, order something for yourself." But something felt wrong. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe I'd just ignored my gut feelings for too long. Instead of going home, I asked my coworker Jennifer if I could borrow her car, claiming mine was making weird noises and I wanted to get it checked before driving it. Then I drove to Brandon's office and waited. What I saw that evening changed everything, though I didn't fully understand it at the time. I sat in Jennifer's car across the street from Brandon's office building, feeling ridiculous. What was I doing? Spying on my own husband like some paranoid character in a bad movie. I was about to start the engine and leave when the building's glass doors opened. Brandon walked out, briefcase in hand, looking relaxed and casual. He wasn't rushing like someone late from a meeting. He strolled to the parking garage entrance, and moments later my white Tesla emerged into the fading sunlight. My heart started pounding. Okay, I thought. Maybe he's coming home now. Maybe the meeting ended early. I'd feel stupid for doubting him, but at least everything would be fine. Except Brandon didn't turn toward our apartment. He headed in the complete opposite direction. I followed him. I kept several car lengths back, my hands gripping Jennifer's steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. We drove for 20 minutes, leaving the business district and entering an older part of town with small apartment complexes and corner grocery stores. The Tesla slowed, then pulled into a parking lot I recognized. My chest tightened. It was the building where Mrs. Louise lived. Brandon parked in a visitor spot, got out, and walked to the building entrance. He pressed a buzzer and waited. A minute later, his mother appeared at the door. She was dressed in a nice pantsuit, her hair freshly styled. She looked nothing like someone who was struggling. What happened next made my stomach drop. Brandon handed her the keys to my car. Not borrowing them, actually placed them in her palm and closed her fingers around them. She smiled, stood on her toes to kiss his cheek, and then walked to the Tesla like she owned it. I watched Mrs. Louise adjust the seat, check the mirrors, and pull out of the parking lot with the practiced ease of someone who'd driven that car many times before. She didn't hesitate. She didn't fumble with the controls. She drove away like the Tesla was hers. Brandon watched her leave, waved, and then pulled out his phone, presumably calling an Uber to get himself home. I sat frozen in Jennifer's car for 10 minutes after he left, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. My husband had given my car, the birthday gift from my father, to his mother. Not for an emergency, not for a day. This was clearly routine for them. When I finally drove back to return Jennifer's car, my mind was spinning with questions. How long had this been going on? How often was Mrs. Louise using my Tesla? And most importantly, why had Brandon lied about all of it? I got home before Brandon did. I made dinner mechanically, chopping vegetables and stirring pots while my thoughts raced. When I heard his key in the lock, I quickly composed my face into something neutral. "Hey, honey," he called out, sounding cheerful. "Sorry I'm so late. That meeting ran forever." I turned from the stove. "It's okay. How was your day?" "Exhausting," he said, loosening his tie. "I need a shower." "Be down in 15. As soon as I heard the bathroom door close and the water start running, I went to check the coat closet where we kept our car keys. The Tesla key was hanging on its usual hook. Brandon must have kept a spare to give to his mother. During dinner, I tested him. "Where's the Tesla?" I asked casually, taking a sip of water. Brandon didn't even pause chewing. "Oh, I lent it to Greg from work. His car's in the shop for a few days. I figured we could use your old Honda until he returns it." The lie came so smoothly, so effortlessly, that I realized this wasn't new for him. He'd probably been lying to me about 100 small things, and I'd been too trusting to notice. "That's nice of you," I managed to say, though the words tasted bitter. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own marriage. I started paying attention to patterns I'd previously ignored. The Tesla disappeared every Tuesday and Thursday. I checked the garage before work and after. On weekends, it was often gone for hours at a time. I began checking the mileage. The car had accumulated over 1,200 miles in just 2 weeks. My commute to school was 8 miles round trip. Even if I'd driven it every single day, that would only account for a fraction of the total. Then I found the receipts. They were stuffed in the glove compartment, crumpled like someone had wadded them up and tossed them carelessly inside. Grocery stores near Mrs. Louise's apartment. A nail salon 2 blocks from her building. A restaurant she'd mentioned loving during one of her rare visits to our home. All the receipts were recent, all dated within the past month. I took pictures of everything with my phone, though I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with the evidence. The breaking point came when Aunt Patricia stopped by unexpectedly one afternoon. I was home alone, grading papers at the kitchen table, and probably looked as miserable as I felt. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, her lawyer instincts detecting trouble. I broke down. Everything poured out. The missing car, the lies, what I'd witnessed outside Mrs. Louise's apartment, the receipts, the mileage. Patricia listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. "Do you have the car's registration and insurance information?" she asked when I finished. I pulled the documents from our file cabinet. Patricia spread them on the table and started reading, her finger tracing lines of text. Suddenly, she stopped. "Clara," she said carefully, "did you sign this insurance modification form?" I looked at where she was pointing. It was a document adding Mrs. Louise as a primary driver on the Tesla's insurance policy. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, but I'd never seen this paper before. "No," I whispered. "I never signed that." Patricia pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. "He forged your signature. That's insurance fraud. And claiming his mother lives at your address when she doesn't. That's another violation." She looked up at me with serious eyes. "Clara, this isn't just marital problems anymore. This is illegal. What should I do?" I felt overwhelmed, scared of what confronting all this would mean. First, we document everything. Then you need to tell your father." "No," I said immediately. "Not yet." "If I tell Daddy now, he'll explode. You know how protective he is. I need Brandon to admit what he's done in front of my father, so there's no way he can talk his way out of it or make me look like the bad guy." Patricia studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Your father's having his annual family dinner in 3 weeks. That could work." She paused. "But, Clara, are you prepared for what might happen? This could end your marriage." I thought about Brandon's easy lies, about watching him hand my car keys to his mother, about the insurance fraud and the complete disregard for my feelings. "Maybe it should end," I said quietly. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. I played the role of oblivious wife perfectly, accepting Brandon's excuses with smiles and nods. Brandon seemed to relax as the days passed. Apparently convinced he'd gotten away with everything. He became almost cocky about it, his lies growing more elaborate and less careful. He stopped hiding the spare Tesla key, leaving it casually on his dresser. He took longer trips with unexplained absences, always with ready excuses I pretended to believe. I stopped asking questions entirely. When the Tesla disappeared, I simply drove my old Honda without comment. Brandon seemed pleased with my acceptance, probably thinking he'd train me to be compliant. What he didn't know was that I was documenting everything. Every time the car vanished, I noted the date and time in my phone. Every receipt I found, I photographed. Every mile on the odometer I recorded. Aunt Patricia had taught me well. If we were going to confront this, we needed undeniable proof. The boldest moment came 2 weeks before my father's dinner. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard a car pull into our driveway. Looking out the window, I saw the Tesla, and behind the wheel was Mrs. Louise. She parked casually like she'd done it 1,000 times and walked to our front door. I heard her key turn in the lock. Brandon had given his mother a key to our home without telling me, and she entered calling out, "Brandon, are you here?" "He's at work," I said, stepping into the hallway. Mrs. Louise jumped slightly, clearly not expecting to see me. "Oh, Clara, I didn't know you'd be home." "I live here," I said simply, keeping my voice pleasant. She recovered quickly, smoothing her blouse. "Brandon said I could stop by to pick up some dishes I'd left here last week." We both knew she hadn't left any dishes. She'd barely visited our apartment more than twice in 3 years. But I smiled and gestured toward the kitchen. "Of course. Help yourself." While she pretended to search for imaginary dishes, I watched her through the doorway. She moved comfortably through our home, opening cabinets like she knew where things were kept. After a few minutes of pointless searching, she gave up the pretense. "Actually, I should get going," she announced. "I have errands to run." "In the Tesla?" I asked innocently. She froze for just a second, then recovered. "Brandon lent it to me for the day. My car's having issues again." "That's kind of him," I said, still smiling. "It must be nice having such a reliable car to borrow whenever you need it." Something flickered in her eyes. Suspicion, maybe, or guilt. "Yes, well, Brandon's a good son." "He understands family comes first." She paused at the door. "You should tell your father to get you a new car anyway. That Tesla's getting older now, and I need something dependable." The audacity of it took my breath away. She wasn't even pretending anymore. In her mind, my car had already become hers, and I should just accept it and ask my father for a replacement. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. "I'll keep that in mind," I managed to say. After she left, I sat on the couch and cried. Not sad tears, angry ones. Frustrated tears for all the times I'd made excuses for Brandon, all the red flags I'd ignored, all the moments I'd chosen peace over standing up for myself. That evening, Brandon came home in an Uber, whistling cheerfully. "How was your day?" he asked, kissing my forehead like everything was normal. "Fine," I said. "Your mother stopped by." He went very still. "Oh? What did she want?" "She said she was picking up dishes she'd left here." I watched his face carefully. "Funny thing, though, she couldn't find them. Must have forgotten where she left them." Brandon's expression smoothed into something too casual. You know how forgetful she gets. I'll ask her about it. We didn't discuss it further, but I could feel the tension humming between us for the rest of the evening. 3 days before my father's dinner, I made my move. I needed to force Brandon's hand to make him admit the truth out loud so he couldn't claim later that I'd misunderstood or exaggerated. "Brandon," I said over breakfast, "my Honda's making terrible noises. I need to take the Tesla to work for the next few days while I get it checked out." The colour drained from his face. "That's not possible right now." "Why not? It's my car." "Because," he fumbled for words, "because my mum has important appointments this week, medical stuff. She needs reliable transportation." "She can use your car," I said calmly, buttering my toast. "My car's too small for her." His voice rose. "She has back problems. The Tesla's seats are better for her condition." "Brandon, my father gave me that car for my birthday, not your mother's medical appointments." His face flushed red. "Why are you being so selfish about this? My mother is struggling. She needs help. You have options. You could ask your father for anything. She has nobody but me." "I'm not being selfish for wanting to use my own car." "Yes, you are." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You have no idea what it's like to actually need something. Everything's been handed to you on a silver platter while my mother worked herself to the bone raising me alone. The least you could do is share what you have with someone who actually needs it." The mask had finally slipped. This wasn't about borrowing the car anymore. This was about years of resentment he'd been hiding beneath smiles and charm. "So, you think because my father is generous with me, I owe your mother my belongings? I think you should be less spoiled and more compassionate," he shouted. "Do you know how embarrassing it is? My wife drives a luxury car while my mother struggles with an unreliable vehicle. What does that say about me?" There it was. The real issue wasn't his mother's needs, it was his ego. How it looked to other people that his wife had more than his mother. I stood up slowly, keeping my voice level. "Where is the Tesla right now, Brandon?" He hesitated too long before answering. "With my mother. She needed it today." "And yesterday?" "Yes." "And the day before that?" "Clara." "How long has she been using my car regularly? Weeks? Months?" Brandon's jaw clenched. "Fine. You want the truth. My mother has been using the Tesla regularly because she needs it more than you do. You have other options. You can use your old car, or ask your father for rides, or take the bus. She doesn't have those choices." "The truth," I said quietly, "is that you gave away something that wasn't yours to give, without asking me, without even telling me." "I'm telling you now," his voice cracked with frustration. "And I'm not apologizing for helping my mother. If you can't understand that family comes first, then maybe you're not the person I thought you married." The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. "You're right about one thing," I said. "We're going to my father's dinner on Saturday. We'll take a taxi since apparently I don't have a car anymore. And you're going to explain to him, face to face, exactly what you've done with his gift to me." Brandon's anger evaporated instantly, replaced by fear. "Clara, no. We can work this out between ourselves. Your father doesn't need to know about this. He gave me that car, Brandon. He deserves to know that his son-in-law decided his mother's convenience was more important than his daughter's property. Please." He actually reached for my hands, his voice turning desperate. "If you tell him, you know what he'll do. He'll overreact. He might try to, I don't know, press charges or something crazy. This is between us. Let's handle it privately." I pulled my hands away. "You should have thought about that before you forged my signature on insurance documents." His face went white. "How did you—" He stopped himself, but it was too late. "How did I know about that? I pay attention, Brandon. Maybe not as quickly as I should have, but eventually I notice when someone treats me like I don't matter." Saturday felt inevitable now, like a storm we'd been watching approach for weeks. There was no avoiding it, no turning back. Saturday morning arrived with dark, heavy clouds that matched my mood perfectly. I woke up early, my stomach churning with anxiety about what the day would bring. Brandon was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. "We don't have to do this," he said without looking at me. "We could call your father right now, tell him we're sick. We could fix this ourselves, Clara. Just you and me." I went to the closet and pulled out the dress my father had given me last Christmas, a simple, elegant navy blue dress that he'd said brought out my eyes. I laid it carefully on the bed. "No, Brandon, this ends today." He showered in silence while I did my makeup. I took extra care with my appearance, not out of vanity, but because I needed the armor. I needed to look composed and strong for what was coming. The taxi arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. The driver made polite conversation about the weather, mentioning that the storm would probably break soon. I watched the raindrops start to dot the windshield as we drove through town toward my father's estate. Brandon sat beside me, checking his phone obsessively. His leg bounced with nervous energy. Every few minutes, he'd open his mouth like he wanted to say something, then close it again. "Clara," he finally whispered as we turned onto my father's long driveway. "Please, we can still turn back. Tell him we're both feeling ill. Give me a chance to make this right." I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered when I'd stopped recognizing the man I'd married. "You had 3 years to make things right, Brandon. You chose differently." The taxi pulled up to the circular driveway in front of my father's beautiful stone house. Rain was falling steadily now, soaking us as we ran to the covered entrance. I could see lights glowing warmly through the tall windows, could hear voices inside. Aunt Patricia opened the door before we could knock. Her knowing eyes met mine and I saw the question there. "Are you ready for this?" I gave her a small nod. "Clara, darling," she said warmly, pulling me into a hug. "And Brandon," she added, her tone noticeably cooler as she stepped back to let us in. My father emerged from his study and my heart clenched at the sight of him. He'd aged these past 2 years since Mom died, but he still stood tall and strong. His face lit up when he saw me. "My dear Clara." He crossed the hallway in a few quick strides and wrapped me in one of his familiar bear hugs. Then he pulled back, his smile fading to confusion. "But sweetheart, why did you arrive in a taxi? What happened to the Tesla I gave you?" This was it. The moment everything changed. My mouth went dry and I couldn't find the words. Before I could respond, Brandon stepped forward. Maybe he thought getting ahead of the story would help him control it. Maybe he genuinely believed he could justify what he'd done. Whatever his reasoning, he spoke with that same defensive confidence I'd heard in our kitchen. "I gave it to my mother," he announced. "She needed it more." The entrance hall went completely silent except for the sound of rain drumming against the windows. I watched my father's face transform. His welcoming smile disappeared. His warm eyes turned cold and analytical, studying Brandon like he was seeing him clearly for the first time. My father didn't shout, he didn't make a scene. Instead, he turned and walked deliberately toward his study, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow felt more ominous than if he'd slammed it. Through the door, we heard him pick up his phone. His voice was muffled but audible. "Yes, this is Mr. Hartford. I need to report a stolen vehicle. A white Tesla Model S, registered in my daughter's name." Brandon's face went from defensive to panicked in an instant. "What is he doing?" he hissed at me. Before I could answer, he rushed to the study door. "Sir, Mr. Hartford, what are you doing? You can't be serious." The door opened. My father stood in the doorway, phone still in his hand, his expression carved from stone. "If you gave away property that didn't belong to you without the owner's permission, that's theft." "I'm simply following the law." "This is insane," Brandon's voice cracked. "You can't call the police on your own son-in-law over a car. I was helping my mother. By stealing from my daughter," my father's voice remained deadly calm. "By forging her signature on insurance documents, by lying to her for months." Brandon's mouth opened and closed. "How did you think I wouldn't find out?" My father's expression hardened further. When Patricia told me something was wrong, I had my people investigate. I know everything, Brandon. Every lie. Every manipulation. Every time you gave that car to your mother while Clara drove her broken-down Honda to work. Brandon's panic shifted to anger. All the resentment he'd been carrying exploded out of him. You think you can intimidate me with your money? With your investigators and your threats? You've spoiled Clara so completely that she can't see reality. My mother raised me alone. She worked 3 jobs. She sacrificed everything while you people handed your daughter luxuries she didn't earn. Brandon, I started, but he wasn't done. That Tesla sitting in our garage was an insult to everything my mother went through. His face was red now, veins standing out on his neck. Every time I saw it, every time Clara drove past my mother's apartment in that expensive car while my mother struggled with her broken-down vehicle, it made me sick. So yes, I gave it to my mother, because she deserved it more, because Clara doesn't need a Tesla when she has Daddy to buy her whatever she wants. Aunt Patricia stepped forward, her lawyer voice cutting through his rant. Brandon, I strongly suggest you stop talking. But he couldn't stop. Years of hidden resentment were pouring out. My mother has nothing. She worked herself to exhaustion to give me a future, and what does she have to show for it? A tiny apartment and medical bills, while Clara gets Teslas for birthday presents. Where's the justice in that? My father let him finish. Then he spoke, his voice quieter than before, but somehow more powerful. You're absolutely right, Brandon. Your mother sacrificed a great deal to raise you, which makes it even more tragic that she raised a thief and a liar. He reached into his study and pulled out a thick manila folder. Did you think I wouldn't investigate when Patricia told me something was wrong? He opened the folder, revealing photograph after photograph. The Tesla parked at Mrs. Louise's apartment building. Mrs. Louise behind the wheel, clearly comfortable and familiar with the car. Insurance documents with my forged signature. Even screenshots from social media where Mrs. Louise's friends commented on her new car. Brandon's face went from red to pale. You had us followed? I protected my daughter, my father corrected. Something you clearly never intended to do. He set the folder down and looked directly at Brandon with an expression that made even me shiver. But here's what you don't know, Brandon. I didn't just give Clara that Tesla as a birthday gift. It was a test. I turned to stare at my father. What? He didn't look at me, keeping his eyes locked on Brandon. In my will, I've set up a substantial trust fund for Clara, accessible after my death. But I wanted to make sure she had a partner who valued her, not my money. Someone who would protect what was hers instead of giving it away to score points with his mother. My father's words hung in the air like thunder. A test. The car had been a test, and Brandon had failed spectacularly. You failed that test in every possible way, my father continued, his voice still that terrifying calm. And now I'm going to do something that will teach you the value of what you've thrown away. He walked to the front door and opened it. Standing outside in the rain was a police officer in full uniform, water dripping from his cap. My heart nearly stopped. He'd actually called the police. This wasn't a bluff or a scare tactic. This was real. Officer Morrison, my father said, this is the man I spoke with you about. He gave away a vehicle registered to my daughter without her permission and forged her signature on insurance documents. I have all the evidence here. Brandon stumbled backward, his face a mask of disbelief. You can't be serious. I'm your son-in-law. This is family business. You stopped being family the moment you chose to steal from my daughter and lie about it. My father's tone could have frozen fire. Officer, I have the forged documents, photographs of the unauthorized use, and witness statements. I want to press charges. Mr. Hartford, wait. Brandon's voice was desperate now, all his anger evaporating into panic. Clara, tell him this is crazy. Tell them I didn't steal anything. We're married. What's yours is mine. I stood frozen, everyone's eyes on me. This was the moment my father had mentioned, the choice I had to make. Clara, my father said gently, turning to face me for the first time since this confrontation began. I need you to make a decision right now. Stand by this man who stole from you, lied to you, and valued his mother's comfort over your dignity. Or stand by yourself, because if you choose him after everything he's done, you're choosing to accept being treated as less important than his mother for the rest of your life. My hands were shaking. Brandon was staring at me with wild eyes, silently begging. Aunt Patricia stood calm and steady, ready to support whatever I chose. The officer waited patiently, rain dripping onto the marble floor. I thought about all the lies, the forged signature, watching Brandon hand my car keys to his mother like I didn't matter, the receipts, the mileage. Louise's smug face as she told me to ask my father for a new car because she needed mine. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, standing beside my father. "Officer," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I support my father's decision to press charges. That car was registered in my name. I never gave permission for it to be transferred to anyone else, and I never signed those insurance documents." Brandon's face crumbled. "You're choosing your father's money over your own husband?" "No, Brandon." I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm choosing myself, something you never did in our entire marriage." The officer asked Brandon to step outside to give a statement. As he was led toward the door, Brandon made one final attempt. "Clara, if you do this, we're done. I'll divorce you and you'll have nothing." I felt Aunt Patricia's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. "I'll have my dignity back," I said quietly. "That's more than nothing." The officer escorted Brandon outside. Through the windows, I could see them talking on the covered porch, Brandon gesturing frantically while the officer took notes. That's when another car pulled up, a taxi. Mrs. Louise climbed out, holding an umbrella, her face set in angry determination. Brandon must have texted her when we first arrived. She stormed into the house without knocking, her voice shrill. "How dare you do this to my son? He was just trying to help me. You rich people think you can destroy anyone who doesn't worship you." My father faced her with the same calm he'd shown Brandon. "Your son committed fraud and theft, Mrs. Louise. The fact that he did it for you doesn't make it noble. It makes you complicit." "Complicit?" She laughed bitterly. "I'm a victim here. My son finally does something kind for his struggling mother, and you treat him like a criminal." Aunt Patricia pulled a document from her briefcase. She'd come prepared. "Speaking of struggling, Mrs. Louise, I took the liberty of running a background check when Clara first came to me with her concerns." Mrs. Louise's face went pale. "You had no right? You have $87,000 in savings from your late husband's life insurance policy," Patricia read calmly. "You own your apartment outright, no mortgage. You receive a pension of $2,000 monthly plus Social Security. You're not struggling financially. You've been lying to your son for years, playing the poverty card to manipulate him." The colour drained completely from Mrs. Louise's face. "That money is for emergencies." "A Tesla isn't an emergency," my father said. "It's a luxury you convinced your son to steal from my daughter by making him believe you were destitute." Mrs. Louise's expression shifted from defensive to venomous. "My son deserves a mother who has nice things. He shouldn't have to be embarrassed because his wife's family has more than his own. I did what any mother would do. I made sure my son took care of me first." "You made sure your son became a thief and a liar," Aunt Patricia corrected. "Congratulations." Mrs. Louise looked around the room, realizing she had no allies here. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You'll regret this. Both of you. When Brandon divorces you, you'll have nothing. No husband, no family." "She'll have me," my father said firmly. "She'll have Patricia. She'll have her integrity and self-respect. That's more than your son will have after this." Mrs. Louise turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Through the window, I watched her argue with the police officer, her umbrella waving wildly as she gesticulated. My father turned to me, his expression softening for the first time since we'd arrived. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" I wasn't sure. My marriage was ending. My husband was giving a statement to police. My mother-in-law had just cursed me out in my father's entrance hall. But somehow, underneath all the chaos and pain, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. "I think so," I said honestly. "Daddy, I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. I should have—" He pulled me into a hug, cutting off my apology. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You trusted your husband. That's not a flaw. That's who you are. Kind and trusting. He's the one who betrayed that trust." Over his shoulder, I saw Aunt Patricia smiling at me with pride. The officer came back inside, shaking rain from his jacket. "Mr. Hartford, we'll need Miss Clara to come down to the station to make a formal statement. We're not arresting Mr. Brandon today. This will be handled through the proper legal channels. But I want you to know we take fraud seriously, especially forgery." My father nodded. "Thank you, Officer Morrison." After the officer left, the three of us stood in the quiet hallway. The storm outside was starting to ease, rain softening to a gentle patter. "What happens now?" I asked. Aunt Patricia answered in her practical lawyer voice. "Now you file for divorce. The evidence of fraud and theft will make it straightforward. You'll need to give your statement to the police, and you'll need to decide what you want your life to look like moving forward."